We're recording now. Apologies for anyone who hears a ding on my texting. We are simultaneously broadcasting this in Spanish, and we're just working through a little issue with that. So I'm getting a couple texts about it. I'm Kathleen. I'm the Director of New and Young Family Support for Down Syndrome Connection of the Bay Area. My son with Down syndrome is 9 and has a dual diagnosis of autism. So I've been very excited about all these dual diagnosis presentations and things that we have planned. And I'm going to be here moderating the chat and watching for the Q&A. Teresa and I both will, but I will mute myself so that you can't hear my noisy children downstairs. And I'm going to turn it over to Teresa.
Thank you, Kathleen. On behalf of the Down Syndrome Connection of the Bay Area, I'd just like to welcome you all to our 5th webinar, and we're going to be focusing on ABA and behavior management today for individuals who have a dual diagnosis. So again, my name is Teresa Unnerstall. I am the dual diagnosis consultant for the Down Syndrome Connection, and I am also the author of a book called A New Course, A Mother's Journey Navigating Down Syndrome and Autism. It is available on Amazon, just so you know. Shout out, A New Course. So, my son, Nick, is 27 years old. He has Down syndrome and autism and verbal apraxia as well. So this again is our 5th webinar. All of our webinars are on the website, www.dscba.org. The first one we did was an overview of Down syndrome and autism. The second one we did was structured teaching activities at home that you can do at home. The third one we did was augmentative and alternative communication. Last month we did a sensory diet workshop, and then today, ta-da, we are doing behavior. We're wrapping it up. So I'm going to share my slides real quick. Hang on. Oh, before I do that, those of you who just came in, we would like it if you could put in the chat box the age of your child, where you're from, if you are currently seeking ABA or doing ABA or seeking information about ABA, and what target behaviors you would like to work on. That will get us a good way to gauge this presentation. So, and again, if you have any questions, drop those in the Q&A box. You'll see those below. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. So again, there's our website, Down Syndrome Connection of the Bay Area, dsconnection.org. So let me talk a little bit about some of Nick's target behaviors that have really benefited from ABA. Some of these include eloping, just taking off running, often running for fire alarms. So that is a big target behavior, and it's still in his behavior support plan. Toileting has been another one. Stimming, and that's both physical stimming. He tends to like to tap, and sometimes that can overtake what he's supposed to be doing in a work situation or a school situation. Verbal stimming as well makes verbal noises. Property destruction. That's a nice way of saying he likes to, sometimes if he gets frustrated or we're not paying attention to him, he may throw things, swipe things, etc. Self-injurious behaviors, SIBs, his might often include pinching his cheeks if he's getting upset, and pinching himself. That I just said that, didn't I? But those are the main ones, just him pinching himself. And then ultimately, meltdowns have been a problem, especially during the years of puberty. So again, I'm just going to mention this one more time. If you just joined us, because I see we have a few more, in the chat box, if you could put the age of your child, where you're from, and if you're currently seeking ABA information or actually doing ABA, and then what target behaviors that you're working on. That would be great for us. So for our DSCBA members, we offer free consultations. Those are ongoing, and you can reach me at my email address tjunnerstall@comcast.net. For today, all our participants, I am offering a free consultation, 30-minute consultation. And again, you can reach me at that email address there. So awesome. So another thing next month, the National Down Syndrome Congress is having their virtual convention, and I'm going to be on the panel with doing a deep dive session, all things Down syndrome and autism spectrum disorder, with Dr. Lena Patel and Dr. Nicole Ballman. Miss her name up. So if you're a NDSC member, look for that, and that's going to be really exciting. All right, so this is just some information about how you can reach me. Since 2012, I've been doing a blog, and it covers all things dual diagnosis, and that's at nickspecialneeds.com. And then all our social media and book information is on my website as well. And we'd love to have you follow us on social media. I put a lot of things out there, videos, tips, strategies that I use, and still learning from all these webinars. I keep learning new things and implementing those into Nick's world just to make things easier for him to navigate. So we'd love to have you join us there. All right, let me take a sip here. So at this point, I'm going to drop my share just a sec.
Can I hop in for 1 second, Teresa?
You betcha. Yes, ma'am.
I forgot to say earlier, and I wanted to say, if you're one of our Spanish speaking families and you want to access the Spanish interpretation, go down to the bottom of your Zoom screen and there's a little globe. You can click on that and choose whether you want to listen in English or Spanish. And if you have any issues accessing it, just chat or put in the Q&A, and I will privately chat back with you on that. That's it.
That's excellent. I'm so glad we've added the Down Syndrome Connection has added that feature. That's amazing. So at this point, I'm going to stop my share and then introduce our presenters today. And then if you can pop yours in when you're ready. So I'm very excited to introduce our two speakers, our presenters. First, Kareem Tarini is the Regional Director at CAIO Autism Therapies. She manages clinical services provided in the East Bay area regional offices. She's been in the field for over 15 years and worked with children and adults with developmental disabilities. Kareem is invested in educating the community and helping families to receive top quality behavior intervention services. She provides consultations and trainings for families, for school districts, pediatric residents, and is also mother of a toddler with Down syndrome. Welcome, Kareem. And then today we also have, I'm scared. Can you say your name?
No problem. Jagmeet Sangha.
Jagmeet Sangha. She is a board certified behavior analyst and the Senior Regional Director at CAIO. She manages the clinical services provided across all regions in California, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Idaho. Additionally, she serves on the board of California Consortium for Behavior Analysis since 2016. As a Northern California liaison, she is invested in educating the community, helping families receive top quality behavior intervention services. And she speaks regularly on interdisciplinary panels, resource fairs, and frequently provides workshops on various topics about ABA. So welcome, and without further ado, I'm going to let you all take over, and I'll be checking the chat box to see the ages of our kids, what you guys want to work on, and monitoring the questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here today. Give me just a minute. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Does everybody see the slides okay? Great. Just organize myself. 1 minute. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about ABA and behavior management. So I want to give just a brief overview of who we are. We are a team of over 500 professionals in behavior health. We consist of behavior analysis, program supervisors, behavior technicians, and our admin team. And the services that we provide are ABA therapy in-home, center, and telehealth. parent training, behavior consultation, and school and community shadow support. And here is where we are. We are in 7 different states, including California, Oregon, Washington, Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and Texas, with multiple locations in most states. So quick overview of our agenda for today. We're going to talk about what is ABA, how to access ABA, understanding why problematic behavior occurs, strategies to increase positive behaviors, and question and answers. So first, let's talk about what is ABA. Applied behavior analysis is a therapy that focuses on behavior and learning. The overall goal of ABA is to figure out why a child behaves the way they do, and then focus on ways to encourage those good behavior habits and correct the harmful behavior habits of that child. It is a science that utilizes the application of principles of learning to achieve meaningful outcomes, and is a well-developed discipline that is used by many professionals. There we go. There's the rest of the slide. So I want to address some ABA misconceptions. What have some of you heard about? Have you heard about DTT, PRT, verbal behavior? These all fall under the ABA umbrella. And some common misconceptions are that ABA is for young children only, or it's for autism only, or it makes children become robotic. While individuals with autism do constitute the bulk of research in the field, and most consistently demonstrated results in ABA, it is used far and wide for many other purposes and with many populations of children and adults, whether it's a dual diagnosis or no diagnosis. Some other examples, childhood behavior disorders, including but not limited to ADHD, OCD, it's used with gerontology, for gambling addiction, for smoking cessation, health, exercise, and weight loss. I think that I've seen just a couple apps out there actually that use the principles of ABA to work on weight loss and increasing healthy habits. So really what we're going to cover today can be used with your children with dual diagnosis, with one diagnosis, and or siblings regardless of diagnosis. So who's qualified to deliver ABA? So ABA services must be delivered by a board certified behavior analysis, which requires a master's level degree and passing of a national competency exam in order to gain certification. Now the BT, the one-to-one level of training, also requires a written exam to gain certification, and this is the RBT exam, and they become a registered behavior technician. How does one access ABA services? Here are the steps to accessing ABA treatment. The first step is diagnosis and recommendation for ABA from a physician. The second step is that the patient contacts their health plan or ABA provider. The ABA provider then works with the family to secure insurance authorization to begin an assessment. The assessment is conducted by board certified behavior analysis. And if the child is determined to be a good candidate for ABA therapy, the BCBA submits a recommendation for treatment to the family's health plan. And then the health plan authorizes treatment and ABA services begin. I always like to mention here that between the steps of 4 and 6, when you get that original authorization for the assessment and to the start of getting ABA services, that there often is a wait. So I always encourage families to reach out to providers right away, even if you're not quite ready to start services yet. Some additional pathways to receiving ABA services can be either through the school district, through regional centers, or through private pay. So let's get to the meat of this presentation, understanding why problematic behavior occurs. The environment impacts and affects our behavior. Now that we're spending even more hours at home than ever before, we have probably been encountering new behaviors and new challenges with our children. So these strategies can be used every day, and today we're going to focus on some specifics relating to the all-in-one home dynamic. What is behavior? Basically, anything and everything we do. It must be something that you can observe. So behavior would not include internal thoughts or internal events. It can only be exhibited by living organisms. Some examples would be drinking your coffee or riding a bicycle. A non-example would be a leaf that moves because it's blowing in the wind. That would not be considered a behavior. So let's talk about problem behaviors. Problem behaviors are those that aren't considered typically acceptable or are socially defined as a problem or a source of concern. Nearly everyone can have a moment of disruptive behavior or an error in judgment. However, problem behaviors are a consistent pattern. Problem behaviors can vary in terms of severity. They can occur in children as well as adults. For most children, problem behavior serves the purpose of communicating a want or a need. So that's very important as we're going to dive more into the functions of behavior, which then determines a treatment that can be developed. And ultimately teaching a more appropriate way for the child to express himself or to get his needs or her needs met. The first step in figuring out why a behavior is occurring is to define and describe the behavior. So without a clear definition or description, it makes it very difficult to determine the cause of the behavior. So when we're describing the behavior, it's best to use objective and observable terms. We want to discuss exactly what we see. One kind of tip I always kind of throw out is, if you were defining this problem behavior, somebody that has never met your child knows exactly what it is that you're talking about. A good example of a definition for screaming would be any vocalization at a volume above speaking level that occurs for at least 5 seconds. A poor example would be screaming, making loud noises. So now that we've defined the behavior, let's talk about functions of behavior. All behavior happens for a reason. The functions of behavior tell us why. And to determine the functions of the behavior, we're looking at our ABCs, or our antecedents, the behavior being defined, and the consequences. We're going to get into more details, but the antecedent is everything that happens right before the behavior occurs. We've talked about the behavior, and the consequence is what happens immediately after the behavior occurs. Never forget your ABCs. Analyzing the ABCs is the only way to truly learn the function of a behavior. Let's talk a little bit more about antecedents. So antecedents is everything that happens before a behavior occurs. This can be environmental changes, demands being placed, desired items, activities are denied or removed. This can also be the presence of a particular person leaving or entering the room, time of day, sound. Knowing the antecedents can help us to identify triggers or clues to the function of behavior. So consequences. Consequences really important because it's going to tell us what the function of the behavior is. Now, there are 2 categories of consequences: reinforcement and punishment. Now, this is really important. Whether a consequence is reinforcing or punishing is not determined by the person providing the consequence, but rather by the effect the consequence has on the target behavior. And we're going to look at some examples that explain a little bit more what I mean in a few more slides. So basically what we want to know is, does it increase or decrease the likelihood of that behavior occurring in the future? Once we know what that specific behavior we're going to look at, you can determine the function. What is the behavior trying to tell us? There are 4 main functions of behavior. We're going to review each in detail, but this is a helpful acronym to help you remember the 4 functions later. The 4 functions are to escape or avoid a task, to gain attention from others, to gain access to something tangible or an activity, and sensory, self-soothing. The first function we're going to look at is the escape and or avoidance function. Simply put, the child does not want to do something. In this example, the child is engaging in noncompliance by verbally protesting to escape the demand of going for a walk. We know that this behavior is likely functioning for escape by observing and taking data on the consequence that follows. So here, Dad removes the demand by going back inside the house. Therefore, he is reinforcing or increasing the likelihood that his child will engage in noncompliance the next time they're asked to do a non-preferred task. So here's an important sentence if anybody is taking notes. If something unwanted is removed following a behavior, then the child learns to exhibit that behavior to escape in the future. Some common antecedents with the escape or avoidance function are a demand being placed, an instruction is given, an item, activity, materials are presented to a child that may represent or signal that an unwanted demand is about to be placed. A good example of this is showing a child their toothbrush. This is signaling you're about to brush your teeth. Some common consequences with this function are the item or the activity presented is removed. The child no longer has to complete the task. The child is ignored or left alone, and in doing so, no longer has to complete the task. So here's another example of this. Kevin's dad puts a plate of peas in front of him. Kevin hates peas. He starts throwing the peas at his sister. Dad becomes frustrated, takes away the plate of peas. In the future, when Kevin doesn't want to eat something, he has learned that all he has to do is throw the food at his sister, and he no longer has to eat the food. The next function we're going to look at is the gaining attention function. In this example, the child is engaging in whining behavior to obtain attention from their mom, who has turned their attention to a phone call. Again, after observing and taking data on what precedes the behavior, we learn that anytime the child cries out, "Mom," that mom will quickly give attention to the child and therefore increase the likelihood of the behavior happening in the future. So this is another important sentence for any note takers out there. If reinforcement is provided following a behavior in the form of attention, then the child learns to exhibit that behavior to gain attention in the future. Some common antecedents with the attention function are new people or activity are present and mom or dad have diverted their attention to that person or activity. Some common consequences with the attention function are the child receives attention, the child is told to stop the behavior or ignored. One thing to note is attention doesn't have to be good attention. Many children seek any sort of attention, positive or negative, and I'll give an example of this. Jeff screams when he sees his teacher. She says, "Jeff, don't do that." In the future, Jeff screams whenever he sees his teacher. So Jeff's teacher thinks that she is decreasing the behavior by telling him to stop, but because all Jeff wanted was his teacher's attention, she's actually reinforcing the behavior. So this is an example that comes back to the point that I had mentioned earlier about the consequences being reinforcing or punishing based on the effects that it has on the behavior, not whether we meant it to be punishing or meant it to be reinforcing. The next function we're going to look at is the access to tangibles function. In this example, the child pulls their sibling's hair to obtain access to the toy that the sibling was playing with. Again, after observing and taking data on what precedes the behavior, we learn that anytime the child pulls their sibling's hair, their sibling drops the toy they're playing with and therefore increases the likelihood of that behavior happening in the future. Another note to take: if reinforcement is provided following a behavior in the form of a desired item, whether that be food, toys, TV, then the child learns to exhibit that behavior to gain access to those tangibles in the future. Some common antecedents with the access function are a child may be hungry, they might be wanting a snack, a preferred item is present, but the child doesn't have that item. And some common consequences with the access function are the child basically gets that desired item or it can be ignored. Another example of this, Jamie sees the ice cream truck and asks her dad for ice cream. Dad says no, and Jamie begins to throw a tantrum. Dad immediately buys Jamie an ice cream so she will calm down. And in the future, Jamie will tantrum when she wants the ice cream. And this is an example that we're going to talk about, and we're going to break it down even further in a few more slides. The last function we're going to look at is the sensory function. In this example, a variety of things are occurring while a child is engaging in a behavior, such as rocking back and forth, meaning that there is not a pattern of common antecedents that occurs with this function because the behavior in and of itself is reinforcing. It is internally reinforcing, which is why sensory or automatic behaviors will typically occur across multiple settings and environments. An example of this is if engaging in a behavior produces a pleasant or desired internal feeling, or it removes an unpleasant feeling, the behavior is said to be self-reinforcing or self-stimulating. Again, common antecedents vary with the sensory function. The child could be alone, no one else needs to be present, and in multiple environments. There are no common consequences since the behavior itself is producing the reinforcement. I'll give another example. Mark is playing by himself in the backyard. He spins on his swing until he gets dizzy and falls over. He likes the feeling of being dizzy, so in the future, he continues to spin on his swing. One thing to note is that we all engage in sensory behaviors. Some examples are rocking your foot back and forth. Maybe some of you are doing this right now. Chewing on the top of your pencil, chewing on your fingernails. A sensory-seeking behavior is not always a challenging behavior if it doesn't impact the person's ability to participate in their daily life. So now that we've discussed the functions of behavior, let's talk about some more examples and see if you can determine the functions of behavior. So we're coming back to that ice cream example now, where Jamie sees the ice cream truck, asks her mom for ice cream. Mom says no. Jamie begins to throw a tantrum, and mom immediately buys Jamie an ice cream so she will calm down. Now, every time Jamie sees the ice cream truck, she throws a tantrum. Sometimes the easiest solution is not always the most efficient in the long term. So let's break down this example. So what is Jamie's behavior? Tantrum. What was the consequence? She gained access to ice cream. Was it reinforced or was it punished? Well, since now every time she sees the ice cream truck, she's throwing a tantrum, we have increased that behavior. It has been reinforced. So what is the function of that behavior? If anybody wants to take a stab, I don't know if I get to see the chat, but. So the function that we're looking at here is access. She gets access to the ice cream. Let's look at one more example. My wife and I got a new kitten, but this adorable little kitten didn't know the difference between our fancy sofa and a scratching post. My wife decided that every time the kitten scratched our sofa, she would put him outside to teach him a lesson. The kitten quickly learned that if he wanted to go outside, all he had to do was scratch the sofa. So this is an example where the consequence that is being implemented was meant to be punishing, but might actually be reinforcing that behavior. So let's break this down a little bit more. What was the kitty's behavior? Scratching the sofa. What was the consequence? It was getting put outside. Now, did this reinforce or did this punish the behavior? Well, the kitten quickly learned that if he wanted to go outside, all he had to do was scratch the sofa. So we increased the behavior. So we actually reinforced the behavior. And the function of this, again, is access. The kitten got access to going outside. So let's, I want everyone to kind of think of one or two behaviors that your child exhibits that you consider problematic behavior. And now think about the most recent time your child has exhibited that behavior. Now take some notes and fill out your ABCs. What happens right before the behavior happens? You have your behavior, and then the consequence that occurred the last time that the behavior happened. And then this is probably a good point if we want to take some questions, if we want to dive into maybe some specifics that people have.
Well, I'll give an example of one that's happened since the pandemic, if you guys will indulge me. So my husband normally travels probably upwards to 80% of the time with his job. And since there has been no travel for the last year, he's obviously been working from home. So my son is not used to having both of us around dinner time at the same time near as much. So antecedent number one, a little change there in the dynamics. So around dinner time, I'm getting dinner ready. Nick is unloading the dishwasher, which is a really good skill strength set that he has. And so he's doing that. My husband comes up, we start talking. How was your day? How was your day? Nick starts throwing things, swiping things, yelling. And when I talked to his ABA therapist, we determined that the function was attention seeking. We were spending our time talking, and it's like, wait a minute, I'm used to having either mom here, just her and I doing this is really different. So one tip that she gave was to acknowledge his good behavior, the fact that he was unloading the dishwasher. And she goes, so you might think that you're reinforcing him, but you're probably not reinforcing him enough as much as you really should. So she said, every time you hear him pick up a plate, good job, Nick, or even non-verbally, like, or elbow bump, something like that. Every time he shuts the cabinet, keep him engaged in that conversation. And since we've done that, I've seen the behavior dissipate. So that's my example. Do we have any in the chat or the Q&A? Anybody got a behavior they want to type in? I haven't.
Really good example, Teresa. And I think that and my next portion, we're going to talk a little bit about giving that reinforcement or that attention early on to kind of make sure that, sometimes we think like, oh yeah, we have given them enough attention, and sometimes that is not enough, or that's not the right time. But we do have one that just came in right now. At the park, my daughter saw a child and pushed her down. I went to her and signed and told her loudly no, and explained that she cannot do that, and asked her to say sorry. Another parent said I was too easy with her. Interesting.
So I wonder why we think the child your daughter pushed the other child down. Do you have a hunch? This is where you have to start doing detective work, I like to say.
I like that.
It might have been tangible, possibly, not, having access to something on the playground the other person was using. I'm just taking a stab here. Feel free to type in what you think.
I was gonna say my son just likes actually watching crashes, so he'll go push people just because he likes to see them crash, which is not so amusing to them.
So that would be sensory, right?
Yep.
No known antecedent. Yeah, and this is where data collection, and people get freaked out about data collection. I literally used to just keep, or still do keep, a notebook and, try to determine, again, doing that detective work, what is it about? Is it this time of day? Is it too hot out in a park? I mean, maybe they need to escape. The last webinar we did, she touched on, the OT touched on some of the body temperatures of individuals with Down syndrome, how they can really go. And that was something I learned. And so I'm keeping that in mind with summer coming in my son. And certainly in the book, I will say there is a story of a pretty bad meltdown where it was hot and he was trying to escape. So
I apologize. I was having trouble finding the thumbnail so that I can unmute But I think when we're talking about functions, sometimes there can be situations where it's unclear. And so in ABA services, what we look at is we look at patterns. So we look at that situation across time, and we're looking at the data, and then we're able to determine, oh, we've been in this situation a couple times, and this is what the pattern is. And now I can kind of see what those clear antecedents or those clues are, and what those consequences are to determine what that function is. Whether it's, and I mentioned in a few slides back, that sometimes being scolded or told not to do something can backfire on us, because a child can be still receiving attention for that, whether it's negative or positive, and can still be reinforcing.
It sounds like another parent also mentioned in terms of pushing. One other thing that you probably want to consider is social skills and how to build friendships. And that could also be an approach from one child to a peer to, I want to be friends with you, but this is my way of getting your attention or wanting you to, you know, notice me. So maybe even if you start to see that pattern of another child is in your child's area and they're, you know, engaging in some of this behavior, maybe proactively seeing, oh, I see your friend is here. Did you want to play with them? Let me show you how we can, you know, engage and kind of build some of those skills for them.
Yeah, and even using social stories for that. I certainly over the years have had my son's SLPs and teachers help me write those social stories. So you give them the script of how to greet people appropriately, you know, high five, elbow bump, that type of thing. And it prepares them that way as well.
I think that's a really good one.
It looks like I just don't want this one to go unnoticed. Somebody before that had mentioned my son vocalizes kind of a burst of angry sound at a moderate volume every time someone else coughs, sneezes, or clears their throat. Not sure what the consequences are. I think sometimes we tell him to take it easy, or we say it's okay, people cough. So I don't know if we have any thoughts on that.
I will say it's when we're looking at function, it's hard to always determine just based on kind of some of these questions. But I would look at kind of, again, those pattern of those consequences that happening afterwards. Is the trigger a sound that he doesn't like? And then is he then gaining, you know, maybe attention in the form of like, it's okay, or something like that? Is it a sound that he doesn't like and he engages in the behavior and it no longer occurs and it's serving as an escape function? Those would be kind of the two things that I might look at there. And again, looking at the patterns over time is what's going to determine that function.
Okay, we have one here from Erin. My son will have a meltdown and sometimes hit me when I have to transition him to any of his Zoom sessions. He doesn't like to leave what he was doing. Once he gets settled, he participates and enjoys it. So that sounds like a transition, something that might be beneficial to have a countdown timer. And you can get those on, there's actually an app, a time timer app, where you can see, and also a visual schedule might benefit.
Definitely. And we're going to talk about some other strategies that can be used for a situation like that. Transitions tend to be really difficult for two reasons. You're losing access to something preferred that you were doing before, and you are now having to go do something that's not preferred. So definitely using visual supports, using a timer, priming. So this is how much time you have left and we're going to go to your Zoom class. Oftentimes I may transition to something kind of more moderate. So instead of going straight from TV to Zoom class, maybe we do something in between, like, okay, we're going to turn the TV off and you're going to have your Apple snack sitting at the table with the Zoom, and now we're going to turn on the Zoom. And it makes it a little bit less painful.
Thank you. Okay, I have another one. I have twins with Down syndrome. Wow, twins with Down syndrome, how fun. Double the fun. They both start to yell more, bang on tables, walls, and touching ours and others' faces. They seem to do this for their entertainment because they laugh afterwards. But it's very annoying because it happens from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to bed.
They
Okay.
do it for entertainment. So sorry, go ahead, Jagmeet.
I was going to say, I'll keep that in mind in the upcoming slides, because similar to the example, Teresa, that you provided of giving that non-contingent attention, or, you know, so much reinforcement throughout the day, and then starting to change it and giving them more attention when they're not engaging in that behavior, and ignoring some of this behavior that you want to change or reduce, may be a good strategy. So this entire exercise is really helpful, because now we're going to be talking about actual strategies, and maybe what we can do is try to use some of the examples you guys have provided here. And I think that you as parents and educators also continue to chat in, and maybe we can break down each strategy or skill as well.
We've got another one here. Elizabeth says, trying to get her child not to pass gas in public from her bottom. She's not getting attention, but rewards and punishments aren't helping. Nick, that's, you know, farts are funny. I'm just going to say it. And yeah, public, not so funny, but I mean, you know, he certainly will do that, and he'll go fava. And I'm like, yeah. So I've got nothing on that. But I can say for my son, it's definitely, he thinks it's funny, and he's getting our attention.
I have a 5-year-old, and I could use some help with that. I think it comes down to teaching the appropriate, you know, environment to engage in certain behaviors. But you're right. I think it is also somewhat typical for boys to find that funny, and maybe girls too. I have boys, so I know that's my experience.
Maybe even a visual of where you can do this and where it is funny, and then where you can't do this because it's not funny. I've tried something similar to inappropriate social behavior, similar to this, of like, just, hey, we're gonna go to the store, but you can come to the car, or you can go to the bathroom, or you can go outside when no one's there. And maybe kind of giving them that appropriate environment, even out in public.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. I will also add, Nick will go to his touch chat and hit "that's gross," and I figured, well, that it is, and so that's appropriate way to to acknowledge that anyway. So we're getting several on vocalization, so maybe toward the end we could address some of the just a lot of vocal stems. So let's keep that in mind for the end. Maybe we could kind of hit those.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this is going to be addressed in this next section, responding to problematic behaviors.
All right, shall we?
Corinne, do you want me to share the slides? So, because I was thinking, so that way I don't have to keep saying.
Sure.
Next. All right.
Sure.
And great. 1 second. All right, just making sure you can see my slides. We're good?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for that chat and those contributions. I think that that's really helpful. And let's talk now a little bit about responding to problematic behavior, and hopefully be able to kind of walk through some of the incidences that you guys have just kind of described. So we talked a lot about the function of behavior, and so pop quiz, fun quiz. What are the 4 main functions? If anybody wants to type it in, but I'll say it along as we go. Access to items, avoiding a situation, wanting a tangible or access to the tangible, attention is number 3, and then something sensory is number 4. And so everything really is just going to boil down to those 4 different functions. And so if you start to put on that filter as a parent and as an educator and say, okay, it's got to be one of these. Sometimes it's multiple, but you'll be able to identify it in that particular bucket. It's going to help you in order to know what you're going to have to do next. Because the next piece of the puzzle is deciding how you're going to respond to these behaviors. Do you want to increase that behavior because you want them to be, loading the dishwasher, and you want them to be engaging in these social play with their peers and whatnot? Or do you want to decrease that behavior? You want to consider what type of consequence you're going to deliver, depending on whether you want to increase or decrease. And so remember, this one, it took me a long time as a early on behavior analyst to really wrap my head around, punishment is not what we think. Punishment is not a timeout. Punishment is not scolding, and punishment is not saying, hey, I had a good chat with my son or daughter or my student, and they're not going to do that again, because that actually might just turn into reinforcement. And that's like a real kind of groundbreaker in terms of talking to parents and educators of, you know, sometimes these strategies, if you had this conversation or you gave them, you know, all of these consequences that you thought was actually punishing, but that behavior happened again, it was actually reinforcing. And so consider that the next time when you say, you know, I don't want you to do this, but the behavior happens again. Well, whatever response that you gave was actually reinforcing. And the last thing is, if replacement behavior, what is the appropriate behavior you want to teach? And so if you're going to replace something, you're going to have to replace it with something. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that means and how you can identify that. So again, based on the main function, so if you want to ignore the behavior, if it's for attention, if it's attention seeking, the child wants your attention, it's really inappropriate in terms of the behavior that they're doing, but it's not risky to themselves or to others or whatnot, you want to be able to ignore that. And if it's self-injurious behavior, but they're doing it for attention, we'll talk about ways to safely ignore that behavior. If they are trying to avoid something, so they just don't want to complete that task and they're being non-compliant, we're really going to just focus on redirection on completing that task. And sometimes that might look like making the task smaller or easier and breaking it down. But the idea is to really get them to complete it, then reinforce them. And so that way the child can see, oh, that wasn't that bad. I can do that next time. If the function is access to items, don't give access to that item. And so, you know, if they really want that iPad, or if they really want to play on that seesaw and they're engaging in inappropriate behavior, well, they have to wait until they appropriately communicate, or they appropriately ask, or, you know, behave in that way to get access to that behavior. And then sensory, provide an equivalent sensory experience. And this one is probably the more tricky one, because first you have to identify, is this truly sensory? Are they doing this not for one of these other reasons, but something inside? This is probably something you want to also be consulting or working with an occupational therapist to really identify what's kind of happening here. But a behavioral approach is that you want to give them something that's going to give them that same sensory input, and allow them to have that sensory experience without that inappropriate behavior, or without that behavior occurring in those inappropriate times. And then this one is just something to remember: praise good behavior all the time. And sometimes we're like, oh, you know, we did enough of that. But do we ever get tired of praise? And do we ever get tired of somebody saying, wow, you're doing fantastic? Not so much. And, you know, our children really, really need to hear this as much as possible, because the more they're hearing this, the more this guides them that they are doing something correct. And, you know, we want to satiate them. We want to give them so much of this praise and reinforcement for these behaviors, so that way they don't have to experiment with all of these other behaviors to see, oh, is this going to get my teacher's attention? Or is this going to get my dad to look at me and talk to me? And so just remember, always teach an appropriate replacement behavior. You want to stop a behavior, but always focus on what is it that the child should be doing or could be doing to get their needs met. I do see some questions coming in, and I'm going to feel free to bring them in. And if Teresa or Corinne, if you wanted to read those, and then we can get to that. Principles of behavior and assessment. So when using any method to determine a function, your goal is to identify what type of consequence is actually allowing that behavior to maintain. So again, we're talking a lot again still about, you know, consequences is either going to reinforce the behavior. That means that behavior is going to happen again, or it's going to punish the behavior. That means that behavior will not happen again. You will not see that. And so those are really important pieces to distinguish again. And I know I just talked about that, but really trying to get that mindset around if I engage in this consequence as a parent or as an educator, and if I see this behavior again, I actually reinforced it. So now it's my job to change the consequence that I just engaged in, so that way I can see a different response from the child. So when you respond to problem behaviors, especially things like pushing, actually any problem behavior, let's take pushing for an example that's come up in the chat a few times, be sure that you're not reinforcing it. So sometimes even an occasional reinforcement is going to maintain that. So, you know, if you're even the example, and this may not be true, but let's say the example where the child pushed another child and then the parent intervenes, and then you have to say, let's say, sorry to them, that could be reinforcing. And so not saying that that was, but I have seen that where that engagement of the parent then, you know, coming out to the playground and trying to mediate that situation, giving the attention to the child, getting them to engage the other child, that could be reinforcing. So it's happening again, try to change your approach and think about what it is that is going to see another response in the future. And the biggest thing that I would say across the board is consistency is key, because it's going to take you a long time to identify these patterns, kind of like what Corinne said, is that it's not that one or two times that it's happened, you know the function and you know how to respond. You're going to have to keep track of these different behaviors in various different ways of, is it happening at the same time of day? Is it happening, you know, the same child? Is it happening, you know, when this dynamic is happening in the home or at the school? Keeping track of that, using some data to really guide what is going on and seeing those patterns is going to be really helpful. And then once you know how to respond, it might not also change immediately because the child's been reinforced and that learning history has already been built for some time, that you're going to have to do it for a little while to actually change that behavior. So consistency is very, very key. We talked a lot about this, so feel free to chat if you guys would like, in terms of, you know, examples of when you thought that you were reinforcing, or you thought you were punishing by giving a timeout or doing these different strategies, and it actually backfired and you saw, you know, that happen. But these are the examples. Reinforcement is any consequence that increases the likelihood that the behavior will occur again. And punishment reduces the likelihood of a behavior occurring again. So this would be a really good one to remember. So if the function is escape or avoidance, so if a child is not attending to their Zoom class when it's time, if they're running out of the classroom when you're asking them to engage in a task, if they are you know, non-compliant in terms of any transition, any of these types of escape or avoidance type of behaviors, you want to ignore that behavior that they're engaging in and stay focused on the demand that you've asked. And so a lot of times you should have an idea of, okay, I'm going to place this demand and I'm probably going to get some non-compliance. And so if you already have that, great. We'll talk a little bit later about proactive strategies, but really you want to be ignoring the entire, you know, I'm going to run, I'm going to escape, I'm going to not be responding to this. But you really want to very neutrally just redirect the child to complete the task. And so some neutral ways that you can do that is kind of show a visual and just kind of point to it of like, it's time for Zoom, or just stand next to the computer of it's time to complete this, or, you know, start to model that behavior of what the child should be doing in that time. You can use different types of physical prompting. So sometimes it's just a gesture, something light. Sometimes it's actually hand over hand of, hey, let's just complete this, and you'll get access to, you know, what it is that you're looking for. And when the task is completed, then you prompt the child to appropriately request a break. So again, you know, sitting through a 15-30 minute Zoom class might be a long time for that reinforcement. So maybe if that's the area that you're focusing on of just, all right, well, let's just sit. I'm going to put the timer on for 3 minutes. and we're going to sit through this, and then you can, have your break, you point to break or you say break, and I'll give you a break, and then we'll try it again. So again, it's okay to break down these skills, especially if your child is having a really difficult time with these types of different demand-based or non-compliance kind of scenarios there. If the function is attention seeking, so one example came in is how can we respond to a self-injurious behavior? Again, is that self-injurious behavior attention seeking? Are they doing this because they're going to get your attention? Is that self-injurious behavior happening because they're escaping something? Is it when you ask them to do something and they engage in self-injurious behavior? Figuring out that function and then being able to know how to respond to that, especially if it's something dangerous like that, because you can't just ignore the behavior simply. But let's use this as an attention one. So if the function was, if a child is scratching or pinching or doing something to their body, causing harm, and they're doing it for your attention because you as a parent or educator is going to step in and say, oh no, we're not going to do that. That hurts you. Let's stop. Let's redirect. In actuality, if they're doing it for attention, you actually have to ignore that behavior. And so you want to, again, be very careful because you don't want the child to continue to hurt themselves. And so you might do hand over hand or block them or use a pillow or something where they're not getting access to hitting their head or, scratching, but you're not engaging any kind of vocal type of, I need you to stop, or this is what's going on, or talking through. It's just a very neutral. And sometimes that means no eye contact. Maybe you're not even facing the child, but you're being able to safely block them so that way they remain safe or, you're safe. That's going to be really important. But especially for attention, if they're doing this, for you to be there for them, to talk to them, to have this eye contact engagement, you really want to be sure that you're not providing that. You really want to be patient because we'll talk about what's called the extinction burst, is that a child is used to getting attention this way for such a long time that it's going to take them a little bit of time, and not only a little bit of time, they're going to try harder, the extinction burst, before they learn, oh, this is not the appropriate way to get the attention that I'm seeking, and therefore my behavior will change or will shape. And then as soon as that behavior stops, then you want to prompt the child to appropriately request attention. Then maybe you can say mommy, or say I need help, or say I want to play. And then when they say those things and they say mom, or they point to mom, or whichever way you're prompting them to communicate, you want to make a really big deal. And you want to say, yes, I'm here. I want to play with you. I want to do this with you. I want to talk to you. And then you re-engage with eye contact and any of that attention that they're looking for. Access to tangibles, so food, iPad, any of these items that they may not have access to for any different reasons. If that is the function, if you've discovered in your data collection and the patterns that you're seeing is that, at this time of day, they're really upset, or my child's having a tantrum because they want to be accessing this item, don't provide access to that item. And let's try to figure out different ways to build that into the schedule. And so that way they're not engaging in tantrum or aggression or any of these maladaptive behaviors to access the items, where they learn that this is what I need to do to go and get this item. And we have a lot of examples later to talk about ways you can build visual schedules, routines, ways you can kind of build it in within your day where a child knows, okay, this is when I do get this item. So that's a good way to give them access and then allow them to know how to appropriately communicate. Sensory, so again, a little bit more difficult because sometimes you can't see those patterns as clearly, but this one has come up a lot in the chat. And so if, figuring out that, yes, this is absolutely, I'm giving my child, I'm not giving them attention, I've given them access to these items. It's none of these other functions, and it's happening because of something internal. then the best thing that you probably want to do to respond to that is help redirect that child. And so again, you know, if there's, let's say, pike hours, a lot of chewing or kind of biting things, you probably want to proactively provide them something that they can appropriately chew on or have, so that way it's not something inappropriate. You do not want to provide too much attention while doing this, because sometimes what happens is you actually pair multiple functions. So it was happening for sensory, the mom really responds, you know, she's very animated when I'm doing this behavior, and I might do this now for attention or to get her attention as well. So those are the things that you want to be careful about. You're very neutral when you're responding to these things. Providing an equivalent sensory experience, we just mentioned that. So different things that you can offer throughout and multiple times a day for your child. These are all of the things that you can do. So again, maybe consulting with an occupational therapist and working with a behavioral therapist or BCBA if you have one, and kind of looking at, this is the function. These are some appropriate items that can be available to serve that sensory function. And in the future, praise and reinforce the child when they're not engaging in that behavior. So I love how your, you know, hands are safe today. I love how, you know, you're keeping your body safe. Again, praise is never going to be enough. And so it's almost like changing your own behavior as a parent and educator of how much praise did I provide for my child today? And while you're at it, how much praise did you provide for yourself? Because that self-compassion piece is so big in this. And maybe for every time you're saying good job to your child, give yourself some praise. Good job for praising my child right now. And be specific with that. So that way your child knows exactly what it is that you want to see in terms of behavior. I love how you're playing with your friend right now. I love how you shared the book with your brother or sister. I love how you're having a conversation with me right now. So these things and being very specific throughout the day as much as possible is really, really going to help in terms of a proactive strategy. So again, we need to teach children what they should be doing, not just telling them what they shouldn't. So this is, again, that fundamental shift of, it's just so easy for us as parents and educators to say, oh, no, we don't do that. Oh, let's stop this. Oh, you know, let's not do that. But really just changing it to, yeah, I want to see more of that. Yes, you're doing great. Or, hey, how about let's do this activity now? So use a day, use a routine, use the, you know, the visuals that we're going to talk about a little bit later to allow your child to know what are all of the appropriate activities that they can engage in, and they can get a whole lot of reinforcement and praise through those. All right. So the next piece is functional intervention strategies. So these are really heavy in some of our technical terms, and I'm going to try to keep them as simple as possible and try to incorporate some of our examples here. Typically, if you're working with an ABA program, a behavioral program, your behavior analyst is someone that would write what's called a behavior plan. If you've got behavioral services at school, this is also something you might see in that setting, where you might have strategies that include things like non-contingent attention, differential reinforcement, and extinction. And these are really kind of core strategies, but we'll talk about it in a very casual basis so you can see how you can implement it. And mostly I've mentioned them all already, so there's going to be a lot of repeat, but these are really the crux of just kind of how you are able to shape behavior. So this fancy word, non-contingent reinforcement, it just means to provide consistent access to reinforcers or to praise, and making that child's environment very rich in terms of how they can have all of their favorite items, all of the attention from the adults in their environment, making it very much available to what the child, how they would thrive and what are the items that they would want to see. What this is going to do is set up the environment so that your child is less likely to engage in some of the behaviors to, gain access to these different things and, gain access to your attention. So again, I love Teresa's example with Nick in terms of, this was an environment where he was able to talk to mom every day during dinner time, and he had 100% of her attention, and it was not disrupted from anything or anyone. And all of a sudden, another factor came in where dad's home all the time. And now we have an environment where that's not available. And so how can you then set it up where you see these behaviors are changing? With the parent that mentioned that, the twins are engaging in more of these kind of vocalizations or banging on the table. Has anything changed in the environment? Was there a change where they were getting a lot of access to preferred items and appropriate behavior? And has there been any shift? Now, I think as I say those words, our environment has completely changed in the last year. So just being careful on, what has changed, what are the things that are in your control that you can bring back to the environment that are going to help your child feel that they don't need to engage in challenging behaviors, that they do have access to these appropriate activities. And again, a lot of attention. Differential reinforcement just means that you're going to provide praise, or you're really going to say nice job or great job for the behaviors that you want to see and not for the behaviors that you don't want to see. So I like to see this as kind of like a spotlight approach of, I don't want this behavior to happen. I don't want my child to just having these loud vocalizations. I don't want them to be banging on the table or hitting themselves or pushing other kids. So I'm really not going to respond. And that doesn't mean that I'm ignoring that behavior and I'm not doing anything about it. In actuality, you're making a statement that this is not where the energy is, and this is not where the focus is, where you're going to get what you want by engaging in these behaviors. But the second that you stop doing those behaviors and you're doing anything small, like just walking without making loud vocalizations and just, sitting at the table without harming themselves, I'm going to make a really big deal about that, because that is the behavior that I want to see. And a lot of times, for all of us, this is so difficult, because how many times do we praise ourselves or our friends for just being ourselves or just being our friends or being our children? So it's a real shift in thinking of what is a behavior that I want to see. And I just need to have all my energy, all my praise, and all that reinforcement go into that type of behavior. Because what's happening is that if that is getting all of the attention and this inappropriate behavior is not getting any of it, you will start to see that shift. So again, this is teaching your child it's more effective to engage in these desired behaviors. And slowly the consequences of the undesired behaviors will start to, that'll start to shape, and your child will start to engage in those less. Extinction. I mentioned this as an extinction burst a couple of slides ago. So this is when a behavior, this occurs when a behavior no longer is receiving that consequence. So again, in the beginning, it may seem so easy of like, okay, I want to ignore that behavior and give this behavior attention. Great, I can do that. But what's going to happen is that your child has been, reinforced for being loud or hitting or pushing or all of these things for such a long time that they might think that, hey, dad didn't see this, or my teacher didn't actually see that I did this. So I might do this a little bit louder because this is how I know how to get their attention. So you might see that burst happening. So it's going to increase before it decreases. So let's see. This is a cool Coke machine example. Buying a Coke from the soda machine. If you no longer get Coke for putting $1.25 into the machine, you would eventually are going to stop putting that money into that machine. So it might take a little while. I don't know if I would pay $1.25 for Coke, but all of these behaviors take time. So to think that some of these strategies are going to be easy as, hey, I put it in place, that's something to really kind of use that compassion filter again and say, we have to be patient. It's going to take time, but it's going to be worth it because this is all backed by science. This is evidence-based treatment. This is, behavior change. And Corinne mentioned this earlier, it's not limited to autism. It's really something that is just human behavior, behavior science in terms of how we all as living beings learn. And it's something to change in terms of our own behaviors as parents and educators, and then be able to change those behaviors for our children. All right, so the next portion is antecedent intervention strategies. Again, heavy words, but the entire idea for antecedent interventions is proactive strategies. This means that I'm going to use this strategy to prevent the behavior from even occurring. So in, something to compare that to is a reactive strategy, which is, okay, now the behavior is happening and I am reacting to it. Really where you want your mindset to always be in is the proactive piece. Because if you can just avoid the inappropriate behavior from happening, it's going to be easier for your child, because that way they're engaging in more of the appropriate, they're getting more of the attention that way, and it lessens the effort on the parent or educator in terms of responding or then having to shape a new behavior. Okay, so 3 top proactive strategies we'll talk about. Token reinforcement system, very, very common. I'm sure many of you guys have heard or maybe have implemented this program. Premack principle, also very common. It's known as grandma's rule or law, and providing choice. So for the first one, let's see. Sorry, I think we messed them up, but we'll start with choice. The idea behind this proactive strategy is that choices allow individuals to really have their opinions be heard. And so at any age and any kind of role that you're, anyone that you're talking to, if you give somebody a choice, it's going to enhance their quality of life. You're going to get the buy-in from the individual early on, and it's going to increase their motivation. And sometimes it can be very, very simple to embed. And, we don't have to make this complicated in terms of, hey, these are our only options. We got to choose from here. But sometimes it's easy as, oh, it's time to log on our Zoom class. Did you want to turn on the computer, or do you want me to turn it on? Or, it looks like, somebody else is playing, coming on their way to play with this seesaw right now. Did you want to ask them to join you, or did you want to play with a different activity right now? Getting dressed, having, mealtime, any of these times throughout the day, if you just presented in a question and just presented in a choice, you will start to see a different responding, because who doesn't like choice? Who doesn't like to be in control in terms of, hey, these are our options, and these are the small things that I'm going to make available as choices, but you do have that ability to decide what we're going to be doing next. Sometimes you can also have a choice board. So this can provide visual choices for the task that you're going to be doing next. It can be used to offer reinforcement choices. So sometimes you might not know what is it that your child really is excited to earn. And so you might say, after we do this, you're going to have a chance to play basketball or, play on the computer. Which one do you want? And again, it really allows a child to have control over the situation, which is going to help, in terms of motivation, cooperation, buy-in, and really getting them to be involved in that activity. One other thing that I want to make a comment on is that a lot of times, we get worried of, how perfect our board needs to look, or, especially when we're talking about some of these strategies, you'll see very fancy cards that are printed, laminated. Sometimes it's just as simple as writing it on the board, excuse me. And so maybe just, drawing stick figures and explaining to your child of like, okay, this is, choice 1, or writing the word, or just being able to draw it simply. So again, keep it simple for yourself and keep it so that it's easy accessible for you as a strategy to go to, versus having to think, oh, I have to create something brand new and have to put this all together. The second strategy is the pre-MAC principle, or grandma's law. And this is really simple. As I say it, sometimes it can't be that simple to put into place, but it's allowing the child to know that first we're going to engage in this behavior that you don't really like to do, but then we're going to get something that you really like to do. And this is a great one for everyone, you know, I mean, especially when we have to submit something at a certain time, or we have to get something done. This is a great strategy that we use because we procrastinate. And so, okay, first I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to earn this for myself. And so it's a great way to really start to think about embedding this in and through to the day-to-day. So that way it builds that consistency, it builds that familiarity for the child of, well, first I have to do this if I want to be gaining access to that. So for example, if you want your child to complete some math worksheets, you know, show the picture of the math worksheets, or just have them placed out, and then place out the book that they can read right after, or the activity that they can do after. Finishing dinner, then you can watch TV. So any which way you can embed this throughout the day with choices or with these principles is a great way to get that buy-in and a great way to increase compliance. So first then cards, they can be, it's a simpler version of a visual schedule. So instead of having a large visual schedule that lays out all of the visuals, it's just smaller. It only just shows 2 activities. So you want to keep it really simple. And it's always used for a non-preferred that's going to be followed by a preferred activity. This is a little bit of what they look like. And the last one here.
I was just going to pop in real quick. So Nick, when he was in elementary school, started with first then, and then we built up to, as he began to be more compliant with his time on task at school, we included 1, 2, 3, 4. In middle school, we used a highly preferred token system, and it was POP. That's what we call it here. You guys call it soda in California. So POP. And then by high school, we got it all the way to Sprite because he loved Sprite. So every time he did a word task for so long, he would put the SPRITE, and that's how he got it. But you can see the progression of how he did improve his time on task, and always find that highly preferred reward, like you were saying. So I just want to jump in there.
Thank you, Teresa. It's really good to see those examples and how these strategies can be effective.
Is at the front door.
And how it can take time to build to that sometimes as well. So the third strategy here is a token system. So this is a system in which an individual is going to earn tokens. So very similar to kind of how Teresa's kind of describing every time that activity is completed, or the length of time that a child is engaging in that activity is completed, they might earn a token, or, you know, they might earn the letter of the word, how she kind of described. So this can be some examples for token systems. Again, you can print these online, you can create your own, or you could just use a piece of paper and say, this is what I'm working for at the top. This is, you know, the number of boxes I need to fill with my stars, and getting that child's buy-in of, hey, let's do this. I know you can do this. And keeping it really easy to earn the tokens in the beginning of building that momentum, and not making those first couple of tasks really difficult of, hey, you have to sit on the computer for 30 minutes. That might be really challenging. And so really understanding, what is the baseline? What is it that my child can do? And therefore, how are we able to kind of increase that time? Here's some other examples of token systems. And some down here is using some of the child's favorite you know, characters or favorite items, different ways to really get a child to make this more personalized and make him excited of, hey, I'm going to pull out this token system. It's really exciting. I get to write in that I'm working for piano, or I get to actually manipulate this and, you know, change this or add the star when I do earn that. All right. And we're going to pause here. If that is okay, Teresa, maybe we can ask a couple more questions, and then Corinne is going to be doing the last portion.
Okay, I'm going to scroll back up here. Okay, my son will sometimes, this is from Aaron, will sometimes hit when people come too close to him in a situation where he's probably feeling a little stressed and there's demands placed on him. For example, when I come too close to him while he's pushing out a bowel movement, I know he's communicating he doesn't want me in his space, but which of these functions does that fall into?
I would say that's a very clear example of he is communicating, I want to escape your presence. I need my space. And I think, I can't see the questions, but whoever wrote that, it seems like they're very, very clear in that situation.
Yeah, I maybe perhaps have a visual of some indication of that. I'm trying to think what icon would be good. Or if you have an AAC device, whether it's low tech or high tech, you could, I often always have the I need a break card or something to indicate I need my space. So that's a thought.
Or even something as simple as a gesture. We want to make it as easy as possible to communicate, especially in a situation like that. So even a gesture, a hand up, but step away.
So Dana asks, is there a concrete example you could share of how to respond to an injurious behavior?
Was this maybe asked prior to, I think Jagmeet kind of went into how to address self-injurious behaviors, but just to kind of summarize, one thing you want to be really cautious of, well, number one, you want to know the function, but I think the example that Jagmeet had given, if the example was to gain attention, you'd want to ignore that, but you also have to be very careful because you don't want the child or the adult to harm themselves. So some examples that were provided was like using a cushion or a pillow or something to block that behavior so they're not getting access to that, but also make sure to, don't make eye contact, don't provide any of that vocal response like stop, don't do that. So you're able to block the behavior, but also you're not giving attention for that.
Yeah, my guess on a lot of the SIBs with our kids with dual diagnosis is usually escape. I'm just guessing. At least for my son, I know.
Got it. So in the event that it was escape, we would want to make sure that we do continue with the demand, of course, so they're not getting out of that task. If the child is engaging in SIB to the point where serious injury is imminent, our number one goal would be to make sure to keep them safe. And then once that child or that adult is calm, then you would make sure that you'd want to go back to that task. Some other things that can be done is like simplifying the task, maybe breaking down the task into smaller steps so that they can complete it.
Yeah, I think so too. And then offering, again, having that I need a break, because sometimes that's the demands, especially with Zoom right now, I can't imagine. So
Absolutely.
Dana also, I believe this is wanted to know about how about aggressive behaviors to peers that I can't see the antecedent. It's hard to say unless we do some detective work on that to see what's the setting for Nick, for instance, in middle school. Very different hall situation compared to elementary school. They all walk like perfect little penguins in elementary school. You get into middle school and it's like mayhem. So we actually put it in his IEP to have him pass 5 minutes before because it was so loud and that just was overload. So you can make you just have to kind of figure out what, look around the environment and, really put in whatever you can. And I know you guys mentioned this, cut things off at the pass, you know, like if I see Nick biting his medical ID bracelet, I'm looking around to go, okay, what's setting him off here? And try to, you know, shut that down before it elevates. I'm reading. Can you guys see the chat or?
Yeah, I think Dana
Okay.
just responded, Teresa, to that of what's appropriate response as a parent when this occurs. And I think the example that Teresa just gave is that I love your idea of like being a detective and really investigating. You are kind of the eyes and ears in that scenario, and really being able to clear out the environment and make it safe for your child is going to be priority, so that way they can, you know, be safe with others as well. And so just kind of being present in that moment, and then over time that'll help you identify those patterns, so that way you're proactively setting it up for success versus the reactive response there.
Sure. You know, I'm going to give another example of an escape, because this is a new toy of ours. We got an air fryer, which are awesome, by the way. But I started noticing, you know, once we plug that in and it gets going, it's kind of it's a low, powerful sound. Now, this is the same guy that could easily turn the volume up, and he's not usually bothered by those sounds, but for some reason, he just started throwing and just getting mad and yelling. And I went, I don't think he likes that air fryer. But it took me a couple of times when we fired it up to realize, okay, so now we just, you know, we've made adjustments to, you know, we just make sure he's not in the room, or we air fry out in the garage. That works too. So, but that, I mean, that really bothered him. And I found that interesting, you know, but I had to, you know, do that data collecting in my head, like, oh, okay, so. All right, Ed has prior to COVID era, we gave access to TV on occasions as a reward. During COVID, it's got 6 hours of Zoom activities. It seems counter to have our household rule to not have so much screen time. It's a shift that's been difficult to adjust to. What do you think we could do? The screen time dilemma presents an opposite scenario. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds like they're worried about too much screen time. Is there another reward that would be highly preferred that you could offer? More choices would be a thought.
I think this one is difficult because introducing our children to more preferred competing activities, especially over the device, can really get tricky. And especially just introducing, you know, to new hobbies or new likes, it can be challenging for everyone. And so I think pairing yourself as a parent, because you are always going to be, very likely you're going to be the number one reinforcer of like, well, maybe you do a short walk together, or maybe you do painting together. And that can be kind of your time, and your child sees as like, oh, I actually really enjoyed that because I get undivided attention for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or whatever that time is with my parent. And then you can slowly start to fade out, and then have that activity be something that, you know, a child, and this could just be for that scenario, or just even really introducing your child to a new activity and independent play. It could be a strategy.
Yeah, I know my husband started taking Nick out for walks because about this time last year, because it was, you know, we were stuck at home, and that became their thing. I went to walk with him one time. He didn't like that. So you go, guys. So. All right, Elizabeth asks, how do you get other adults to buy into this system? This is the behavior talk I'm not sure. Okay, this is the behavior talk I've ever heard. Okay, I'm not sure which adults you're talking about. I'm assuming teachers. If you want to add something to that, Elizabeth, so we can hone in on that better. Oh, she said, this is the best talk. Thank you. Awesome. I would say getting everybody on board on the same page. You've got to collaborate as an IEP team. And honestly, I can't imagine any student with a dual diagnosis not having a behavior support plan. I mean, I just don't think you can do it. And especially if there's behaviors that are dangerous, I mean, that's a safety issue. So that's the leg you stand on. It's like, you know, we need to request a functional behavior analysis and, you know, get these target behaviors under control. And even not even the negative behaviors, just functioning, you know, daily functioning, like I mentioned, the toileting, the communication, it's so key. So anything else from you guys on that? That's my, get off my soapbox.
I think Elizabeth responded with babysitters, grandparents, other adults have trouble with praising good, ignoring bad. That's not harmful. I think that is such a common scenario, Elizabeth, because really we're just shifting generations upon generations of parenting styles, right? And we're saying like, oh, ignore the bad and praise the good, versus we've just been able to respond to the bad behavior as, no, let's not do this. Thank you for your comments. And I think that one way to kind of talk about this is really show progress, and, you know, proof is in the pudding. You know, work on one tiny little skill and really model it and say like, hey, you know, I worked on this using this strategy, and look, now my child is brushing or eating a new food or tying their shoe, or any of these, like one easy to, some of those are not very easy, but one thing that you feel like, yeah, I can really change and really implement and kind of showcase that using the principles of behaviors, I was able to change this. And then the other piece is really getting buy-in and getting people to really understand what the science is about. And once people understand that it's not limited to a diagnosis, it's not limited to parenting, this is behavior science, and this is how we all learn. This is how our society functions. You know, we're doing this at organizational levels with organizational behavior science. If anybody has a Fitbit, you're tracking your steps and what you eat throughout the day, that's behavior science. If you're driving on the road and you're, following when to stop at the red light, that's behavior science. So really thinking broader in ways that people are responding to different things sometimes is helpful for people to understand and get that buy-in and say, oh, we just have to shift in terms of how we're teaching here.
Yeah, my in-laws are 85, and every time we have a get together, I have to remind, and not as patient as they used to be. And I often have to give them that gentle reminder that, okay, remember, don't say it's in his behavior plan. It's been for a long time. You can't say the word no, Nick, because that'll just, boom, that's it. Meltdown's going to happen. And so I little gentle reminders of like, okay, if Nick starts swiping things, we're not paying attention to him enough, and I think that's across the board, just having that briefing, if you will, that helps, get people on the same page.
And I was just going to mention, I think when I'm looking just kind of like at my son and trying to give suggestions or reminders to my family, it's different. It's received differently from me. And so like having them participate in your child's therapy, like have them like talk to your child's OT, talk to your child's, ABA provider. It for whatever reason, it's different coming from somebody that is just a different professional. It's different than coming from, I think, a family member. So I know that's been helpful for us, is getting like our caregiver and getting grandparents involved with our service providers.
That's a good idea. Andrea asked, how do you handle sensitive transitions? I wait my kid out a lot, but there are times when you just have to get in the car and get to school, get the seatbelt on, finish a shower, and she'll hit herself or me. Yeah, transitions are hard. And I think prep work, seeing it visually, what's going on. When, again, I've mentioned the visuals are every single webinar, that's your blueprint. We all need that blueprint. We need that guide that will help lower the anxiety level, and they'll know what's expected. So using the visual schedules. And also you do have to allow some wait time, and you have to build that in. I think those are my two suggestions.
Yeah, I think those are great ideas, Teresa. And I wish that I had a magical solution, but unfortunately, it takes time to work on these things. One trick that I've used, and it might not work across the board, but I know for my oldest, we do cheetah speed sometimes, and it makes it kind of fun. And he goes really, really fast, and we get to where we're going. But I think when you're talking about working on something like this long term, like Teresa mentioned, like, using visuals, using priming, so reminding them, using timers, and just working on this over time and giving yourself more time. I know sometimes you're rushing, you're out the door, it's not always possible, but when you can, give yourself more time, because this is a skill I'm working on, and hopefully you'll get to that point where it doesn't take you 30 minutes to get in the car. But look at, this is the point that I'm at now, so what can I do at this point that I'm at now to increase success?
I was going to chime in because this has been a really hard one for us, the getting in the car, and we've had to mix it up because what works for a while then stops working, and you have to find some other thing to motivate him. But two things that have motivated us really well for the car is, number one, giving him a snack that he does not get in the house. So he loves Cheez-Its, and he now knows that he only gets Cheez-Its in the car. And interestingly, my initial thought was, okay, we wait for him to climb in the car and we buckle him in, and then he gets his bag of Cheez-Its. But he really resisted that. And we discovered he wanted to be able to carry the bag of Cheez-Its out to the car. So if we gave him the Cheez-Its in the house and said, here's your Cheez-Its for the car, then he would walk out and get in the car. And when that one stopped working, those videos on YouTube where the kids open the boxes and we're all like, why do you care that a kid is opening a box? But kids love these videos. Sam has been watching them, I guess. And so opening boxes is his big thing now. And so I went to the dollar store and got a bunch of little boxes and a bunch of stupid little $1 items, and I taped them all up. And when he gets in the car, he gets to open a box. So then he sits there in his, booster seat, unwrapping whatever stupid item I had put in the box, to be honest. And he doesn't care what the item is. He just wants to open the box. But that has been a good motivator for him. And I share that just in case any of you guys are like, I've tried everything, I'm out of motivators, I don't know what to do. Those are two that have recently worked for us.
Kathleen, I love that, because you're realizing his currency changes, and they are going to change, and you got to find that hook. What is it? I love that. We actually did the same thing with my older son for potty training. He would go number one, but not number two. So I went to the dollar store and wrapped up a bunch of same exact like you did, and I called them poo-poo prizes. I mean, that was the best $5 I spent. It worked.
These are great ideas. I don't have special surprises in my car, but I do have a box of books and games and different things that my son gets access to only when he's in the car. So it makes it a little bit less boring, but just to kind of throw out one other idea. So I'm wondering if sorry.
Oh, no, I just flipped over to the questions box. Denise says, this is off topic, but I am new to the group. I am just about to engage with ABA therapy. We live in Sunnyvale. I am wondering, with so many options, how do people choose their ABA provider? They're interested in home therapy. So I'll turn that one to you guys. I think you're going to address that in a minute, aren't you?
Yeah, we do have a slide at the end.
Okay.
And Denise, we also offer free 30-minute consultations on ABA, and this is not, again, limited to a diagnosis. So if you're just, even for anyone that's on this call that is looking for one-to-one behavioral consultation, I will put our website in just a second, and you can actually just sign up for a consultation, and then we can help answer. And then if you're actually looking for the ABA therapy, you can then talk to someone on our team in that Sunnyvale area or whatever area you're in, to see if we're a good match for your needs.
Yeah, and to tag along on that, Melissa, hi Melissa, how are you? I think she says, I think it's important to choose an ABA provider who connects with your child, certainly, and tailors the program to their individual needs, not just play. I see that all the time, and with my consulting as well. At times, ABA therapy can be rigid and will try to fit your child to a model. All kids are different, and when a therapist doesn't respect that, the sessions will not be successful. So I think that kind of tags along to some of your next slides. So maybe we should push through to those.
Okay, let me share my screen. All right. Is everybody able to see the PowerPoint again? Okay. So we're going to really jump into some additional strategies that you can use. Here's just a quick list of what we're going to go through. And just because we have 20 minutes left, I'm going to move along pretty quickly so we can get to any other questions that you have. So creating rules. Why rules? My 5-year-old always asks me, why do we have so many rules? Well, rules help to emphasize what is most important to your family. What are the expectations and the priorities? It also sets the stage for what's appropriate in different locations. You may have, rules for outside time versus inside time versus in the car. Create manageable and realistic expectations. And without clearly established rules, there can be confusion, there can be consistency, which can lead to more inappropriate behavior. So when you're creating rules, you want to think positively, state rules positively. So an example of this would be, instead of having a rule for no hitting, your rule could be quiet hands and feet, or keep my hands to myself. Another example would be, instead of having a rule for no yelling, your rule could be, I talk nicely. It becomes much easier to enforce the rules also if everyone is following them. So make sure as parents to model these expectations for your child throughout the day. And following rules appropriately should always be praised and always be reinforced. This comes back to what Jagmeet was talking about, is reframing our state of mind. It's so easy to kind of step in and jump to, when we see an inappropriate behavior. Don't do that. That's not appropriate. So reframing your thinking to making sure that you are reinforcing appropriate behavior instead. A few other tips for rules: use simple language. You can even use icons instead of words if that is going to be more appropriate for your child. And again, praise instances of rule following behavior. And place generic visual cues around the environment and more specific ones near the applicable area. So like if you have specific rules related to like brushing your teeth or meal times, put that near your kitchen table. And we're going to also talk a little bit more about visual supports in more detail also. Routines. So I'm going to probably spend a lot of time on this slide. This slide really is just kind of using some new routines that have come about with COVID, but really I want to talk about just routines in general. Routines can be the backbone of our day-to-day life. Creating a consistent daily schedule is essential for children to thrive and to cope in any environment. Routines, especially when paired with some of the other ABA strategies that we're talking about, can reduce tantrums, can reduce stress, can reduce other problematic behavior, and they also foster a sense of order in your life and your child's life. Make sure to update and incorporate changes. This slide talks about a lot of the changes that we've all been faced with in the last year. But other examples of changes can be like if there's a big transition coming up, if they're transitioning to a new school, if you're moving to a different home. So things like that should also be incorporated into routines. All families need some type of routine to establish normalcy. So a way to get things done and a sense of security. Children often fear the unknown, whether it's the broccoli on their plate or a big life change. Gaining a new sibling is another example of this. I think Teresa mentioned this also when we were talking about the example of transitioning into the car, like having children know what's to come next is going to make things, that transition and those things much more successful. It can be stressful for children to not know what's coming next, and a normal routine brings comfort and consistency. Some examples of things to include in daily routines: getting ready in the morning, bath times, meal times, nap times, bedtimes, incorporating certain chores that need to be done or homework time, and also including like special family times. So like if you have, dinner time is when you get to have one-on-one time with mom, incorporating that into the routines, or maybe at bedtime you get to pick, special books to read. So having children know also what those special kind of fun things in their day, when those are coming. Some other benefits of routines: it helps your child get on a schedule. Helping your child get on a schedule can help with eating. You eat at the same time every day. It can help with sleeping. You're going to bed at the same time every day. It just in general creates a calmer household, and it establishes healthy, constructive habits. And it helps you, the parent, also remember the important things that you want to and you need to get done throughout your day. And coming back to putting those like special moments on your daily schedule or adding them into your routine, it offers your child an opportunity to get excited about what's ahead. And you can use those moments to get through the non-preferred tasks. So remember, as soon as we're done with dinner, we get to, watch a cartoon together for 30 minutes. It's your choice today. So it provides an opportunity also for those special daily rituals, and it offers stability in a time of stress. Visual cues. Visual cues can be text cues, they could be pictures, they can be placed in the environment to remind the child about the location of an item. An example of this is putting pictures of like their socks or their shirts on the drawers that have the socks and have the shirts. They can also remind children to complete important things. For example, a note to turn the light off when they leave the room. You can change the size depending on the environment and the age of the child. A younger child might need a larger visual picture cue. And you can decide, depending on your child, what's most appropriate. If you want to use pictures, if you want to use words, or if you want to use both. And definitely make several sets. And I always like to suggest including like a pocket set. So things that you might use when you're going out into the community. And I think, Teresa, did you have something that you wanted to share on this slide? Okay. So here are some tips to using visual schedules. Review the schedule at the beginning of activities and during important transitions. Model using the schedule and physically prompting the child depending on skill set. So your child is going to learn to use the visual schedule more quickly if the number of errors is reduced. So they're not automatically going to know kind of what this visual schedule, you're going to make this amazing schedule. They're not automatically going to know how to use it. You have to teach this. It's likely that your child might also need help completing the steps or might need prompting through the activities on the schedule. Then eventually, over time, you can increase their independence with this. But in the beginning, a lot of this is going to have to be taught, it's has to be modeled, and it's going to have to be prompted. If you're introducing a schedule that includes several different activities, especially non-preferred activities, it's better to start with 1 or 2 activities and then gradually add in more. And if the steps of an activity are difficult for your child, provide plenty of support so that they don't become frustrated. And again, we want to reduce the errors that are happening when we introduce the visual schedule. And you can see kind of an example here. This one's color-coded. It's very visually easy to see. So when creating a visual schedule, think about what format is going to work best for your child. It's going to depend on age, maybe just depend on kind of what they respond to best. Do they respond to picture, written, object? I talked about size, it can be larger if need be. And it should be displayed in a central area that is easily accessible. So coming back to teaching them and explaining the schedule to your child. Like I mentioned, don't expect them to be able to follow it independently right away. You need to teach each step and activity and rules. And sometimes you might have to break it down even more. You might find when you create this schedule that you put something on there that needs to be broken down into smaller steps, and that's okay. Prompt and reinforce completion of each task. And we want to also incorporate self-monitoring when we're using a visual schedule. So like the child should be interactive, so the child can cross it off or can check it off or can remove it if it's removable. And then always, again, reinforce following the schedule. Here is an example of different kinds of interactive schedules. So you can see one gets checked off. The one in the middle looks like it's probably Velcro, so you remove it after the activity is done. And the last one, I like this because it's just so simple. It's so easy. You can take a piece of paper and do this. I've done this sometimes like in restaurants or on the fly or on the go, or when we're at a relative's house, and then your child can just kind of cross out the activity as they've done it. It's also important to remember to give your child a say in their activities as well. Here's just one more example of a kind of really simplified visual schedule that is just for getting dressed in the morning. And just includes, getting dressed, eating breakfast, brushing teeth, driving to school, and then, something that we've added over this year is putting your mask on. So social stories, I love using social stories. Social stories are a great tool to review the nuances of different social skills, especially when you have a new event, or in this example, we've had some new community safety rules that we've had to teach over this last year. They're usually short, they are simple, they can be individualized, and it should explain the rules and the expectations of the new social scenario. In this example, it's wearing a mask. The social story is written through the perspective of the learner, so you use a lot of I phrases throughout the story. It should be read multiple times before the learner has to exhibit the skill. Basically, the more often you read it, the more effective that it can be. And you want to revisit it after and continue to revisit it as the child is learning that new skill. And you can see here on the right hand of the slide, a little Google visual. There are so many resources online and examples of social stories and free printables that you can download and you can individualize for your child. So what to share, how much to share, and how to explain things, how to talk to your child. Be open, be direct. This is, I will just kind of preface this was a slide that we added, I think, over this last year because there was a lot of questions and things that were coming up around like talking to your child about what's going on right now, what's going on in the world. Why is everybody wearing masks? There's been some, interesting and sometimes scary situations. So be open and be direct and use language that is accessible for your child. When you're reviewing rules, think about what's going to be the most important change, the most important thing to highlight for your child. So when we're talking about new social safety rules, do they understand maintaining social distancing? Are they able to tolerate wearing a mask? So have they learned to shake hands with new people? So knowing expectations if you go out into the community, knowing not to shake hands with new people that you meet. And as much as possible, model appropriate behavior. And let your child ask questions and provide answers that they can understand.
Kathleen, can we run over a little bit for questions? I'm just looking at the time.
Yeah, it's totally
Okay.
fine with me.
Okay.
I don't think this shuts off, so.
Okay, I didn't think it did either, so.
Not that I
didn't
know
how
of.
much more you have. I just want to make sure we had time for the final questions and thoughts, so.
Yeah.
There's a few of these slides I can maybe go through a little quicker and make sure that we do have time for questions at the end. Modeling and generalizing behaviors. We've talked a lot about this today throughout the presentation. Modeling is one way in which behavior is learned. So when a person observes the behavior of another and then imitates it that person is basically modeling that behavior. So it's important to model all new behaviors as much as possible and in different environments. There's also the use of video and or peer modeling that are sometimes helpful and ways to increase opportunities for modeling behaviors. Have different models. This makes me think of what we were talking about with having like grandparents and caregivers involved. Having them model these things is going to increase the likelihood that those new skills are generalized to other environments and with other people. Shaping and desensitization. Does your child learn best when the skill is broken down or with repeated exposure? So shaping involves teaching a skill in which a behavior or skills gradually taught by reinforcing small steps towards the ultimate goal. And in this example, you see the task of wearing a mask was broken down. The very first step being just tolerate the mask being out on the table. And you gradually start to reinforce getting to your ultimate goal. So you can see the next step is, okay, you touch it, you hold the mask. The third step is you put it on just for 1 second. The fourth step, you tolerate wearing it for longer periods of time. Then eventually you're able to tolerate wearing it for longer times. So you're gradually reinforcing, you're breaking down this very anxiety-provoking task into smaller steps and reinforcing until you get to that ultimate goal. This is a really important slide. You are going to be so much more successful if you have buy-in. So try and make things that, things that are really demanding, things that could be, make children very anxiety-provoking, a little bit less anxiety-provoking. So we just put some examples on here on how to kind of like make things fun. Here it was an example with the mask wearing is like putting it on a stuffed animal, decorating it, using the use of token boards. Some things to keep in mind: consistency, be as consistent as possible, plan for generalization, use different parts of the house during the day, and of course, make things fun. Pairing. Jagmeet had mentioned this earlier, but you are really going to be probably the most reinforcing thing to your child. So what is pairing? Pairing is connecting with your child, building and strengthening the relationship by associating yourself with your child's favorite activities or favorite items. You are basically pairing or making yourself the reinforcer. The process of pairing is important because it sets you up as the provider of all good things. So making things fun is part of this also. And additionally, through pairing, you're connecting with your child. You're building and strengthening that relationship. And, so it's really important to pair yourself. A good way also to do this is coming back to that non-contingent reinforcement. That attention for nothing, just that special one-on-one time with mom or dad. And make sure that you're having fun. Children know if you're faking it. So if you're not having fun, they're going to pick up on that and they're going to know. It's also important to know what your child doesn't like. So refrain from trying to make something that they don't like into something that's preferred. So following their lead, that's really important. What you think is really, really fun and they're going to love they might not love it so much. Have fun. Be silly. If you have younger kids, get down on the ground, play with them, make funny noises. Whatever it is that your child wants, you should be the provider. This is a fun time. And during the pairing process, it's essential that you are not placing any demands on your child. They should have access to toys, access to stimuli should be free. And also thinking about how you're communicating during that time. So you may not think about it, but let's say you're trying to play and you're telling them, drive the car with me or stack the blocks. Like, you might not be meaning to, but you're essentially placing demands. So changing your communication to, wow, my car drives fast, is also something that might be helpful. And after you have great success with demand-free play, your child is actively engaged, and you can start introducing some demands. And this is also setting you up as the reinforcer, as mentioned. So we want that your child to be motivated to gain your praise. So if you're setting yourself up as a reinforcer, then you're setting yourself up to be able to provide effective, consistent praise for those behaviors that you want to see increase, and for them completing things that are hard and completing demands. So this is just a slide that is kind of thrown on here. I often sometimes talk to parents and they're like, well, I don't know what my child likes, or, you know, so this is just kind of some ideas of what can be reinforcing. It can be lots of different things. It can be, it doesn't always have to be the iPad. It doesn't always have to be a piece of candy. It could be their favorite snack. It could be bubbles. It could be social play, tickles, a hug, a high five. It could be going outside. Some general tips on reinforcers, and I know we're out of time, so I'll go through this pretty quickly so we can get to questions. Be sure that you know what is a true reinforcer. So you mentioned before, you might pull out some activities that you think are super awesome and your kid is going to love, and it might not be. So know what is really a reinforcer, what they really like. Deliver the reinforcer immediately after good behavior, within seconds. Practice, capture opportunities for good, correct behavior, and contrive situations for more practice. Use a variety of reinforcers to prevent satiation. Satiation is basically a fancy term of they're getting tired of that. If you're using the same thing over and over again, eventually we all get tired of something that's reinforcing. And pair. We just talked about pairing. And the last one is frequency. Some children require lots and lots of reinforcement, a very dense schedule of reinforcement to remain appropriate behaviors. Ultimately, we want to fade that reinforcement over time, but think about where your child is in that moment. Like, meet them where they are. If you're just starting to work on something, they may need a denser reinforcement schedule. And then over time, you can kind of fade that. And as you are the reinforcer, you're pairing yourself. Like, you want to replace it with praise also. I rushed through the last bit of that, but this does conclude our presentation. I hope that we provided some really helpful, tangible information for you. You know, it was mentioned before, but I just want to also mention it here. You can see the slide with our information that at CAIO, we provide free 30-minute consultations with the BCBA available in English and Spanish. This is a really good opportunity. I always encourage families look into this. It's a good opportunity to discuss in detail the individual needs of your child. I know we had some questions that may require a little bit more detailed conversation, so this would be a perfect place for that. And we also provide free webinars on various topics. So visit our website, check out our events page for current webinars that might be of interest to you. And thank you all so much for attending. And if anybody wants to stick around, we can answer a few more questions.
That was an amazing presentation. Again, I continue to learn and things I know, but it's nice to be reminded of. Appreciate that, even at my ripe old age. So we do have some more questions or in the chat. I'm trying to think. I don't want to miss anybody's that we did. And if we'd love for you, while we're answering these questions, if you could write in the chat box your aha, I like to call it the aha moment, like, I'm going to take that. You know, what's your takeaway? What are you going to, you know, I think that's always fun to see. For sure. I'm definitely going to continue my saturation of positive. Yesterday we were at Culver's and everybody wanted Culver's. Everybody wanted a Butterburger yesterday. So we're in the line and Nick starts hitting the window and I'm like, you know, we have to wait, there's cars. And then as soon as he stopped doing that, I'm like, good waiting. And I just kept doing that. And he was just like, you know, I saturated the reinforcement. So that's just a little thing while I'm, let's see. So it seems like we're getting a lot of that kids that are touchy and huggy, and parents are needing some ways to establish rules. I think a social story is always good, that you prep them beforehand. I actually brought this one, gosh, this is from middle school. And it's like, I mean, that's how simple this is. This is not about touchy-feely, but it's just like we literally reviewed that. It's walk, quiet mouth, quiet hands. And then they actually go through. Nick's highly motivated by seeing himself. So you see him, you know, okay, first we're going to walk. So you're basically giving this, as I mentioned earlier, the script of how you want them to perform whatever it is, if it's a task or if it's a behavior, or if it's just a different setting. So I can't say enough about social stories, and really, and any visual in particular for our kids. Anybody want to add to that thought there? Of course, there is one page that says, no hands down the pants for you. You guys that have boys, it's a real thing. I'm just saying. Watch
Don't
out,
tell
Kathleen.
me that. Don't tell me that, Teresa. We haven't gotten there yet. And I'm telling myself, yeah, it's not going to happen.
Oh, you just wait. And one of our attendees says, in their classroom, we teach other actions like fist bumps, high fives, and connections. You know, giving some type of appropriate. I think Nick was way ahead of his time doing the elbow bump before COVID. He did that in high school, and that's just his way. Sometimes he'll just stick it out like that. His way of saying, hey. Let's see. So Ed asks, regarding modeling, how do we get better as parents if we don't model the behavior well, such as putting away electronics? We're human after all. You have to discipline yourself, I guess.
I mean, I think just making a statement right there, you're acknowledging, like, I need to model this behavior better. I mean, that's where it starts. I know we have certain times a day in my household where electronics are just gone. And weekends or times that we have to get tasks done, we are aware that sometimes we might use it a little bit more, and we just set time limits and we stick to them. But
Yeah.
it is hard. It is hard, especially over this last year, because we don't go anywhere. We don't do anything else. So, you know, I'm the first to admit that we have gone down the rabbit hole of using electronics more than we would like. And we've slowly gotten back to, I think, a more appropriate level. But yeah.
Yeah, I know Nick sometimes will the battery dies on his iPad, he'll chuck it. And please send me an email if you need any bulletproof cases. I'll message you back. So we just made a social story here where, you know, he's reminded that if the iPad breaks, it's gone, you'll be sad. And then but to put it in the spot here. So that's I just happened to bring that down. Oh, here's a good question, Elizabeth. If a child must undergo a painful procedure, like a vaccination, tooth removal, should the child be told in advance? But if told in advance, this can be horrible. I mean, I think about myself, I don't want any surprises. So I think the more you can prepare them in advance with the social story, and step by step, whether it's real pictures, like this last time I went to the doctor's office, I had the social story. We had to do a blood, no, we didn't do a blood draw. We just did a checkup. And we went through it, but he was just not responding to the PEX pictures, probably because we haven't been to the doctor in a while. So I literally just took pictures of the scale of the office, and I'm gonna next time reintroduce it that way. The other thing I would say is try to go to the office in lower stress situations. And I think that helps. And then modeling, as far as vaccinations, I know with flu shots, my husband will get his, I'll get mine, and then Nick sees that we're getting it, and that helped a little bit. I had another thought there, but I think just kind of reviewing, you know, giving them the script of what's going to happen, especially if you go to the doctor's office and there's not going to be a blood draw. You know, I actually have, it's like no owie today. So that's my 2 cents on that. Anybody else?
I try to take Sam to as many of my doctor's appointments as I can, just so he sees me like modeling. It's not scary here. We don't get a shot every time we're here. Sometimes we just go in for a quick checkup. And that does seem to help. Blood draws, of course, are a nightmare, but it does seem to help. I'm not sure there's any way around that, but I also wanted to say, back on the subject of electronics, one thing that was really helpful for us, and this kind of plays into what Corinne was saying about sometimes it is better to hear things from other people. If we tried to institute time limits on the iPad, we got a lot of resistance and a lot of negative behavior, but there is a feature on certain newer generation iPads and things like that, where you can set them to shut off after, 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 15, whatever you want. And he was totally cool with that. When it would shut off, he'd just go, oops, and hand it to me. And that did work for a while. And then he figured out how to request more time and grant it to himself. But for a beautiful while, it worked really well.
So Kathleen, did you have an aha moment today?
Gosh, I had a lot of them. I don't know. My brain has been in ABA for days because we're just now setting it up again. Because, and some of you may have found this, Sam is not a Zoom kid. So we did away with it during the Zoom time. And now that life is returning to normal, we're setting it up again. So I've sort of been steeped in ABA for days and having many aha moments.
Yeah, I mean, I write a lot in my book about obviously behavior, but at the end of the book, I have many categories, and one of which is ABA behavior. And I can't say enough about identifying that function, using that acronym EATS. And then literally, I just all day when Nick does something, I'm like, oh, that's escape. Oh, that's, and I can again do that detective work and try to figure out how I can support him better in general. So we had one aha moment from Ed says, or Dana, that there's currency changes. Absolutely.
I wish there wasn't. Life would be so much easier if one currency worked forever. But
wine and chocolate, that's all I need. And my cat. And we said some thank you. I'm glad. Remember to make a big deal out of what they do. Yes, catch them being good. Make it a party. Like, yeah, absolutely. I know. I was thinking about one of the escapes that I'd forgotten years ago when Nick was a nightmare having haircuts. I mean, he's much better now, guys, by the way. Find the right clippers. Message me, I'll give you that if you have a boy. And maturity has helped. But I can remember he would literally just pee in his pants. And I think that was his way of like, this is freaking me out. It's a good way to escape. So I'd forgotten about that over the years. We have found that allowing tons of private time and embedding it into routine, first, go to the bathroom, second, go to my room, close the door, third, private time, fourth, get dressed, meant that we have literally no problems with hands in the pants. Very good. Yes, there is a book by Mary Robo, Taking Care of Myself. She has a lot of social stories in there, and it deals with these private issues. Okay, Kathleen, cover your ears. When they get into puberty, that you want to redirect, that's perfect. That's exactly what you want to do. You can have your alone time, but you need to go into your room or into the bathroom. Those are acceptable. So Sanders says she explains a doctor appointment, and oh yes, reward, absolutely. That I forgot to mention that DQ Sunday, that's the currency for her child. And certainly we're off to, as Nick says, dadules. That's McDonald's. I mean, lickety split right around the corner. Love that. Aha moment from Bart. Routines are the backbone of the family environment. I actually wrote that down to myself as a reminder. All right. Let's see. That was the chat. Let me just double check the Q&A here. Oh, I don't know that we addressed, Denise was asking about how do you find the right ABA provider. I know there's different levels. in my book, one of the lessons I put is that not all ABA therapists are created equal. I guess that's probably not how I wrote it, but that's in essence, you will have some that just aren't getting your child, and you need that chemistry. They need to be not just playing with your child. I get that a lot in my consultations with other families. So any tips on that you want to add, Corinne?
Sure. And I just want to say thank you to Jagmeet. I think she has to hop off now. But thank you so much for stepping in.
Thank you so much. It was awesome.
Thank you, everybody. Good one.
Bye.
Take care.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a loaded question because I do work for an ABA company that I obviously have been there 8 years and stand very much behind. It's really going to depend on what's a good fit for your family, what's a culture fit and what you're looking for. Kayo has a very naturalistic teaching approach. Where we individualize all of our plans to fit the needs of the client. Before we even take on a new client, we do an intake call and we talk about all this. And we talk about like our scheduling policies. We talk about the logistics. We talk about all of that stuff so that a parent can make a decision like, this sounds like this is a good fit for me. These even like the logistics, the boring stuff. But yeah, these scheduling policies will work for me. And this is a good culture, it's a good fit for me. So I think those are some things that you want to ask yourself, are you getting responses? Is the company that you're communicating with, are they responsive to you? Check out their website, check out reviews.
Yeah.
I think too, to not be afraid to request a different BI or BT, what do they call them? BI, BT. If it's not a good fit, we've had 5, I think, and 1 is just a fantastic fit with my son. 2 of the others were pretty good fit, 2 not a good fit. And it really is just like you go out in the world and you don't get along with everybody. There are people you totally click with, and there are people you get along with, and there are people that you just don't click with. And so it's just a matter of finding one that really, clicks with your child, because I think it was Corinne that said buy-in is key. We totally found that. Totally. When he did not buy into the ones that didn't click with him, he would spend the entire 5-hour session doing absolutely nothing. But the one that he really liked, he'd do everything. And, they'd play games and they'd do learning things and we'd go out for a walk, and it was wonderful. We'd do all this kind of wonderful transition work while having fun because he really liked her and he was really willing to hang out with her.
I would 100% echo that. And, sometimes we have families that feel bad doing that. And I just explain to families, it is nothing against your behavior therapist. It is just a personality mismatch. And sometimes as a parent, you might have a behavior therapist that you love and your child is not really vibing with them. So that's important to know too. Are they, is your child responding to this person? They may be doing everything right and it's just a personality mismatch. So definitely I echo what Kathleen says. Don't be afraid to kind of say what you're seeing and what your child's needs are. And if it's a personality mismatch, then you can, look for another BT.
Absolutely. I want to mention that we at DS-CBA we have a low-tech library, and it's accessible to anyone. And there's a lot of choice boards on there. There's a lot of automatic social stories, going to the dentist, going to the doctor. That is at our website, dscba.org. And I believe it's under the education tab if you go there. I mentioned earlier we have a dual diagnosis tab. All the webinars are on there, so you can access it at any point on your own. And just a reminder, we are offering free 30-minute consultations to all our attendees today. You guys that are DS-CBA members, those are ongoing for you guys. I'm here for you. My passion is to make this journey smoother and easier and help you support your child and make them the best version of themselves. So. And then Corinne, I know you mentioned you're offering, heck, you guys take advantage of the free consultation. That's fantastic. We appreciate that and all you guys have presented today.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a lot of good material and a lot of great questions, and really enjoyed it today.
I could be wrong, and it could also be on the education tab, but I just went and looked at our website, and it looks like the low tech library is actually under the programs augmentative alternative communication tab. But I agree, there's tons of good boards on there. It's a little hard to find on our website right at the moment, but once you get to it, there are a ton of good boards on there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it's under augmentative alternative. Okay. But yeah, definitely look at those. The visuals help so much. They really supported Nick, and I can't say enough about all these webinars and tying in everything that we've done to really support your child with co-occurring Down syndrome and autism. So on behalf, if that's it, I believe on behalf of the Down Syndrome Connection of the Bay Area, we'd like to thank you for your time. And Corinne, thank you. And you guys were awesome. I appreciate, and hopefully we could work together again. I would love to keep this up. So, and Kathleen, thank you
Absolutely.
as always.
Thank you guys.
All right.
This was great.
You guys have a good day.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.
Bye.